would like to start this session discussing about some basics of the optimizer tool included in NDS. Basically, NDS is equipped with two optimizers. One is called linear optimizer and the other is called non-linear optimizer. Let me describe very quickly why we developed two optimizers and why we did that. Linear programming is commonly used to auto-balancing the diet because it helps the nutritionist in formulating what we can call now optimal ration at the lower cost. This is something that is very popular, and all of you had some experience with the least cost optimization in order to balance diet. This linear optimizer has proved to be powerful and has been most widely used in least cost formulation. So it is still a great tool, but unfortunately, even if it proved great success, he demonstrated a great success. The straightforward application of linear programming in formulating optimum diet is not exempt from important difficulties because the sustainability of linear programming for optimization depends on the linearity of the program. I try to explain what I mean for linearity of the problem. Nutrients like crude protein, fat, starch, minerals are constant proportion of the ingredients. Regardless, the amount of the feed consumed by the animal. If I feed 1 kg, 2 pounds of soybean, I am sure I am supplying 450 grams of protein. And if I double this amount, I supply a double amount of crude protein. That said, this is a linear response of this parameter. Just an example talking about crude protein. But unfortunately, there are some criticism related to the application of linear programming, and these are primarily lie in 3 points. First, the relevance of the cost of the recipe as the only relevant criterion for the decision as a decision maker. We are moving towards the maximum responses of the diet in order to get the maximum, in order to maximize profitability, not necessarily to minimize the cost. And the second aspect is related to the rigid characters of the nutritional requirements. In fact, once a certain nutritional requirement is established, no violation are allowed. If I want 16% of crude protein in my diet, the optimizer provide you 16%, no flexibility around the best inclusion of this nutrient. Third aspect, maybe the most important, is related to the non-linearity of the biological responses predicted by the dynamic models. With the advent of the dynamic models, we are talking about non-linear responses because we want to simulate what happened within the animal, and we want to describe the biology and the responses of the biology many times are not linear. Nutrient like metabolizable protein, metabolizable energy, absorbed amino acids, or rumen available proteins are not constant, but they vary according to the feed consumption, the ration ingredient, and the animal type. So we don't know in advance how much metabolizable protein can provide my feed when included in a diet. The metabolite, if I have a soybean meal, I always the example using soybean meal. If I include soybean meal, the same soybean meals in terms of specs, in a high lactating diet, and at the same time, because I am in the same farm, I include the same soybean in a heifer diet, the metabolizable protein content of this soybean, it is not the same, it is different. So there is not a linearity in terms of responses. Based on this, with the advent of the biological models, we realized that it was necessary to develop something different, and that is the reason why I included a second optimizer within NDS, and I am talking about the nonlinear optimizer. The nonlinear optimizer is in terms of functionality, it is very different from the linear optimizer that are available in many of the nutritional software, because it is not deterministic. I mean, it is not simply based on set of equations or set of algorithms, but basically the nonlinear optimizer is a search optimizer. In other words, within a specific region, let's say region, it looks the local minimum or the local maximum based on the constraints we set for feeds, for chemical parameters, and for model parameters.
Romano?
Yeah.
Hey, I hate to break your sentence there. Are you sharing your screen, or are we just seeing NDS? Yeah, okay. Somebody had questions whether we were supposed to be seeing slides but we're
no. I'm just talking, and I open an example through my NDS.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay, I decided to not bother the attendees with a set of slides, but just to make an introduction, and please let me know if I'm not clear enough.
Sounds
okay.
Good. Yeah.
So I would like to catch your attention on the nonlinear optimizer piece of the NDS, because we think that using a biological model like the CNCPS, we can get more advantage using a nonlinear optimizer instead of the linear one. So that is the reason why I introduced this aspect. That is the reason why I would like to describe the tool through a real example. And during the example, I can describe some aspect related to how it works. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, based on this, again, I am showing only the recipe screen from my NDS. You didn't lose nothing in terms of presentation. I open a high lactating cow. This is a recipe that I recently got from an user, an NDS user from Spain, and he sent me this diet in order to share with me an issue that he is discussing with one of his customers. And the issue is not strictly related to the balance of the diet, because you can see that these cows are producing 88 pounds. The diet is relatively well balanced. The model is calibrated because the deviation between the observed and the predicted milk is quite good. Maybe these cows are not eating according to their potential. Maybe this cow can eat a little more, but all these aspects have not part of the issue. The real issue and the question they made is, okay, I am feeding this diet, the protein sources, the cost of the protein sources increased a lot in the last couple of months. So I am forced by the customer to reduce the cost of this diet, maybe reducing the crude protein content. The question was, can I reduce crude protein content of my diet so I save some protein sources? I don't like when people ask me this kind of question, because the proper question in my mind would be, can I balance my diet in a different way in order to reduce the cost, and maybe after we can discuss how to maximize income over feed cost. Because one of the aspects that I would like to respect is related to the performance of the cow. I do not want to lose performance, because even though I save money, I do not help the farmer to maintain their profitability. So in my discussion with this guy, I proposed to invoke the help of the nonlinear optimizer in order to verify if rebalancing this diet, we can reach our goals. First, maintaining the performance. The second goal, reducing the cost. So I open the optimizer. here you can see the screen of the nonlinear optimizer. This label tells you that we are working with the nonlinear tool, and it looks like as many other optimizer available on the market, because the user can constrain the fees based on some consideration related to the kind of feed, to the feed inventory, all this kind of stuff. This is not necessary. Then the user can constrain what I call the chemical parameters or the chemical specs. I select some relatively short number of parameters to constrain, fiber, starch, couple of minerals. I also included here crude protein just to monitor how this parameter will evolve during the optimization, but I unchecked crude protein because I do not want to optimize for crude protein. The reason why I do that is because I want to focus on metabolizable protein, not on crude protein. And in the bottom part of this session, I also selected a list of model parameters that I consider critical in some way to monitor during my optimization, and as a consequence, I set some min and max for these non-linear parameters or model parameters. I use these two definitions, model parameters or non-linear parameters. Again, I do not want to go in depth in some aspect of the optimization. For example, now I do not want to optimize for amino acids. I do not want to change some balance of some relationship between the fees, just to see if the optimizer will be able to provide a different way to reach my goal, that is to reduce feed cost. Another aspect that I would like to mention before to describe the settings is that my preliminary goal is not to change the milk yield. In other words, I leave the mean metabolizable supply and the mean of the metabolizable protein supply around the current level. The current level is 19 as a percentage of the requirement for ME, 98.6 for MP, and my minimum is 99 and 99. I am telling the optimizer to give me a solution, not changing much the current milk yield predicted, both by ME and MP, just because I want to compare the two diets, the current one and the new one, based on the same intake and based on the same potential yield. I am available to answer questions in case you notice that someone needs clarifications. Again, here you can see the constraints that are generated by the system when you open the first time the optimizer, and then you can change the min and max based on your consideration. I fixed the inclusion of some ingredient. I mean, fixed means the mean is exactly the same as the maximum. I do not want the optimizer change these inclusions. I put some min and max.
Romano?
Yeah.
So I think what we decided, we'll let you keep going through the setup and everything, and we'll hold the questions till the end. There was one question. Is that corrector 0.2%? Is that a feed? That is a.
I did answer the question. So
Okay.
that's a buffer from this company where this this user share the recipe.
Okay, perfect. And we'll just hold those.
What the question was?
About one of the ingredients, corrector 0.2%.
Okay. Yeah, it is a custom premix basically.
Yeah. So we'll kind of hold the questions and let you go through, and then we'll hold some of those questions for after you go through the the setup and the workings here. Okay.
Okay. It's fine. So min and max for feed. Here you can see the current dry matter intake 53.7, and I set up a very tight range for dry matter intake, again because I wanted to compare the two recipes, the current one versus the optimized, based on comparable numbers. This is my first step. We can move forward, changing something maybe later during our simulation. Before to run the first optimization, let me describe the settings. The settings is a screen, is a section that allows you to define some aspect related to the optimizer. First, we are working with the non-linear, but in case we can switch to the linear. We are optimizing on a dry matter basis. Okay, even though the feed are included here on a hash-fed basis, the optimizer will always work on a dry matter basis. Just some layout information where I want the current recipe at the left of the constraints, at the right of the constraints, not critical information. I want to highlight the changes in the feed based on a predefined deviation. So when the inclusion of one feed change more than 2% in this case, it will be highlighted. The current recipe I want to have not the base recipe but the last accepted. Some additional information related to some capabilities that the optimizer has. In other words, we can optimize for decad, for UNDF, for mineral. We can get a mineral optimization as a percentage of the requirement. But again, these are all advanced approach to the optimization that I would like to skip today. At least, again, there are questions. Exclude from the recipe the ingredients that are defined as 0. But the most important aspect here are related to the objectives of optimization. We have basically two groups of objectives. The first group is called primary objectives, and the second group is lists the secondary objective. The primary objectives are the economic objectives and allow you to optimize the recipe based on the reducing feed cost or increasing profitability. We can minimize total cost, we can minimize purchase ration cost, or we can maximize income over feed cost or income over purchase feed cost. In this case, we want to start as a conventional approach, trying to minimize the total cost of the dye. Then we have secondary objectives. Secondary objectives are mainly related to efficiency and productivity predicted by the recipe that the optimizer is able to formulate. In other words, we can try to maximize milk efficiency, milk production, productive nitrogen efficiency, forage content, components. How these secondary objectives work when you select one of these? Basically, if we select only a primary objective, the recipe will be able to optimize through the nonlinear optimizer, considering only this goal, while selecting, in addition to the primary, selecting a secondary objective, the optimizer will seek solutions considering them both. The optimizer try to meet all the constraints you set for feed and for parameter, select the solution that will tend to have the highest possible level for the secondary objective in the context of those solutions that minimize or maximize the primary objective, whether they are optimal or suboptimal solutions. I'll describe what I mean for optimal and suboptimal. In other words, by selecting a secondary objective, very often, even if not always, this will reach highest level than for the secondary objective than those achievable by setting only the primary objective. Is an information that we give to the optimizer in order to filter among all the solutions, those solutions that tend to maximize the secondary objective. I mentioned optimal and suboptimal solution. One of the issues that sometimes we have with the linear optimization is that if we do not set properly the constraints, sometimes we get infeasible solution. It is not something that is going to happen with the nonlinear optimizer. The nonlinear optimizer gives you always a solution, and the solution could be optimal if all constraints are met, or suboptimal if some of the constraints you set are not within the min and max, but little outside. This doesn't mean that from a nutritional standpoint, the suboptimal solutions are not acceptable, are just mathematically not optimal. I'll give you an example. We set a minimum for magnesium like 0.35% on dry matter. Maybe I get a suboptimal solution where magnesium is 0.33. I am not really sure that from a nutritional standpoint, 0.33 is not acceptable. From a mathematical standpoint, the solution is a suboptimal solution, but I have to check if from a nutritional standpoint, it is acceptable. That is the reason why we provide two sets of solutions, optimals and suboptimals. Sometimes the optimizer is not able to give you optimal solutions. Okay, check the suboptimal solution and verify why it is suboptimal. Sometimes with small changes, we can get very nice solutions from a nutritional standpoint, even though some of the constraints we set are not met. Then at the bottom of this screen, we have other two information that I would like to mention. Quick search mode, we have two options. Quick search mode is what we suggest because it is much faster in giving you the solutions, even though the search within the region we defined with the constraints, it is not fully explored. We can compare solution that we can get with or without search mode on, and you will see that having the quick search mode set as on, you are gonna get very well solutions in a much faster, and the optimizer will run much faster. Then the parameter of the optimization, you do not need to set this kind of information because there are some defaults that the optimizer use, iteration, number of samples, variability, but this is something that the optimizer use internally. The only parameter you may want to set is the number of solutions. In this case, I set it as 3. What this means? It means that, for example, if the optimizer was able to identify 10 optimal solutions, I am asking it to show me the best 3 solutions based on the objective, and not more, because I am happy to compare only the best 3 solutions. But of course, you can increase or decrease this number. Oh, sorry, another aspect, just to make you aware that there is another settings related to the dry matter intake out of bounds. I said before that here on top of the fees section, you can set the min and the max of the dry matter intake, and through this setting, you tell the optimizer that you can accept, you can even accept solutions that are out of bounds you set by the percentage you set here. In other words, if the optimizer will be able to give me a good solution with a higher dry matter intake than the maximum bound I set, I can accept these solutions if the out of bounds is no more than 0.5% or maybe 1%. Just to give the optimizer more flexibility in order to give us more options to select the possible solutions. Okay, when I close these settings, it saves automatically all what we did, and now we are ready to run the first optimization. Here, if you move on the optimize button, you can see that it will run the optimization trying to optimize as primary objective as minimize total cost. Run the optimization. This number tell you how many optimal solutions and how many suboptimal solutions the optimizer found, and the priority is given to the optimal solutions. Instead of 8, the optimizer show me the best 3. The best 3 based on the objective that I set, and in this case it is related to the minimum cost. Here you can see the constraints, fees, chemical parameters, and model parameters. In this column here you can see the current level, the current diet basically is include 85 pounds of corn silage, 44 grass silage, and so on. And here the 3 columns describe the 3 solutions. The first aspect I would like to highlight is that the 3 solutions are around 54 pounds of dry matter intake, 54, 53.9, 54.2. All these 3 levels are within the min and max and are very close to the current intake. What about the cost? $6 per head based on the cost. We can discuss about the cost, but it is not the focus now. The current cost is $607 per cow, 578, 79, 79, 8. All the constraints are well respected. The 3 solutions are predicting ME and MP allowable milk very close to the current one, and even the model parameter are all well respected. What about the inclusion of the fees? Because the goal was to minimize the cost, trying to reduce the inclusion when possible of the protein sources. 9.8 pounds of soybean, 9.25, 25, 25. Interesting is that in all 3 solutions, the optimizer took the maximum we allowed. In other words, it doesn't consider, even though the soybean cost is very high, it focuses on performance. Not necessarily he will provide us solution with less soybean. What about crude protein? Again, the crude protein, can you see that the crude protein is highlighted with this gray box? The gray box means that crude protein is included in the list of the chemical parameters, but it was unchecked, and that means that the optimizer ignored the crude protein during the optimization. But given that it is included in the list, we can see the evolution of the crude protein in the three solutions. Current level 16.7, 15.8, 15.9, 15.9. Allowable milk, almost the same, little difference. So this might be a first level of solution. I am happy with that. Maybe I have here some other parameters to check based on the current predicted, and the three solutions we have. Income over feed cost. The predicted is 7.2. The predicted related to the current diet, 7.2, 7.6, 7.6, 7.6. Not a really increase in the income over feed cost. So now I would like to see if changing the primary goal as maximize income over feed cost, the optimizer will be able to give us different solutions in trying to maximize income over feed cost and not necessarily minimizing the cost. So I run a second optimization where the primary objective is the maximization of income over feed cost. $7.9, $7.8, $7.8. What about the cost? The total cost is still lower than the current one, but through a different formulation, I am able to have little more milk. Can you see here that the optimizer tended to increase milk yield within the same dry matter intake in order to not necessary to minimize the cost, even though the cost is lower than before, but focusing on marginality. And in this case, the marginality, the income over feed cost is higher. Another way we can follow in order to give our customer the proper answer, or maybe more answer in order to make him able in making the proper decision, is related to an addition we did recently. If I right click on the milk yield predicted, I can access to what we call target milk yield calculator. In other words, if I want to force the optimizer to increase milk yield, I can tell the optimizer at which level I want to, I would like to reformulate my diet, and it provide the proper level in terms of ME supply and NP supply. I should include, I should get from the optimizer in order to respect my new constraints. Let's say I would like to have 88 pounds in order to see if I can increase again the income over feed cost. This should be the level of metabolizable protein. Sorry guys, here there is an error in terms of conversion of metabolizable protein. So in reality, metabolizable protein are, we have to multiply 0.454, but in any case, we are optimizing based on percent of the requirement. So I get the data, the system get the new constraints, and I run again the optimization. The goal is to reach 88 pounds of milk. I have a similar income overfeed cost, even though the optimizer will be able to reach even higher than my objective, because you can see here the new constraints are 100, 102. So it took the freedom to move within these constraints. And in this case, the new income overfeed cost is still 7.9. So it is something that I can discuss with our customer to see if we want to try to get more milk in order to maintain or even increase the profitability, or if we want just to reduce the cost in order to save money without any other changes in terms of responses. So I just move through a very simple example. There are some further functionalities available, but again, given that it is something that we wanted to set as basics, I would like to leave Dave to jump in the discussion, maybe working with the comparison. Why the comparison? Because once you decide which diet you want to get as new diet, you simply select the column, you click on solutions, you get confirmation, and the system will take the solution you selected and it brings into the recipe screens in order to compare what happened with after our optimization. And from here, I think Dave could have some considerations. Right, Dave?
Yes, I will.
You can use you can use your example, but I tried to describe the different scenarios we are working with.
I think you gave us a lot to look at, and even showed me a few things. Every time we do this, I keep learning. So what I'd like to do is just go and run some optimizers, and we will should have asked Emiliano. Are there other questions, Emiliano, to address right now? I think we're covering most of those as we're going along.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize. Can you show Dave with your mouse where the version number is of NDS? Yeah, so
right
that's the latest one. Okay, so if you see a number lower than 06, it means you need to update your NDS. So some of the stuff that Hermano has been showing were from recent updates. Okay, so that might be the reason why you don't see some of those in your NDS. Otherwise, everything should be.
Or maybe, Emiliano, some stuff will be included in the next update.
Yes, yes.
And you young guys like Emiliano, you don't have that problem, but when you turn NDS on, you'll see a pop-up bubble that comes up down here that says, a new update, and all you have to do is click on it and accept the update. And if you don't, it will not you don't catch it, and if you're not looking, but it will pop up right down here. If you do not have that version, you can always go to Utility tab. And inside Utility tab, if you click Search Updates, it will run down and give you, it'll connect to the mainframe computer and check for an update, and it'll let you know if you are running the most current one. The other neat feature that they added was an update description. So right down here, you can access the PDFs that are loaded onto your NDS directory, and you can see, okay, the last one was done 2/22, and here are a little synopsis of some of the things that were added in there. So really cool little features. So just make sure you're keeping updated. Anything else, Emiliano?
All good. No, all good from this side. Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to open up our demonstration diet, and I'm going to open up the mix. And again, we haven't covered a lot of this, but you can see the mix is nice little pink color, or what does my wife say? That's salmon. But I'm going to just take out these 3 feeds just for housekeeping. And then if I wanted to unmix the mix for optimization, I can unmix the mix, and now I have 2 different colors. But for today's demonstration, I'm going to mix the mix back up. And so I'm going to leave it the same and just remix it through the remix button. We have been talking, we'll try to get these videos along with yesterday's cut into individual segments. The optimizer and comparison is one video, so you don't have to watch all 4 hours to see what you want, but we'll have to edit those, and that may take us a few days, but then we'll make them available for attendees to the seminar. Hopefully we can get that done by the middle to the end of next week. So I've just done little playing around here, organizing my diet. What I may do is go in here and now save this as, and I always just put this as a working copy. I'm playing around with my diet, thinking, I wonder if I can do any better. Everybody wants more milk, more least cost, different ingredients. And so what I'm going to do is just save this so my accounting is done right. And I may say that, everybody wants a little more milk, so I'm going to see if I can do 2 more pounds of milk through here. And then I'm just going to take it over to the optimizer. And again, it will fill with the parameters Romano was showing. Here's my ingredients. Here's the linear optimized parameters, and then the non-linear. And so what I might first do is, the way that it was taught to me is that this is a snapshot of the recipe screen. And if you notice, some of the things didn't carry over. Where's my haylage? And what you can do is go to the utility button here, and there are several options here. Regenerate specifications actually goes back to the recipe page and refreshes this. If you had some of these other features, like if you said, I never want anybody feeding more than 12 pounds of high moisture corn, you can set that up in some user constraints for feeds in that area, and you can look at some of these other functions. But the real easy one is regenerate specifications, and it opens up a percent of either side of all my feeds. Real easy to work with, real easy to look at. If I wanted to, I don't have any hay in this diet, and I could easily click this little button twice. And let's just do that with the feeds we're not using the first time. So if I double click on those, you can see I'm excluding that feed from my optimizer. Okay. So now I have a snapshot of the diet here, and here are my feeds with about a 7% window on either side. but my mineral mix was set in, and I can go hand enter that, or I can right mouse click on that feed and fix the min and the max at the current diet. I don't want it using the mineral as a dry matter intake constrainer, so let's just take that off. I can sit and I can go by dry matter here if I'm doing dry matter pounds, and then I can sit and say, hey, I have a different amount of corn silage here. I can go down through and I can change my ingredient area. I can say, look, I want to do apples to apples, so I want to make sure that I'm 57.8. I don't want any more dry matter. I want to compare apples to apples on this thing. I want it knowing exactly where I am. I'm probably going to have to go 57, 58, give it a little room. Let me just go into my settings, and this is where Romano spent a little bit of time. So if I go into this settings, you can see that I'm running the non-linear on a dry matter basis. I want my current diet on the left of my constraints. I'll show you that in a minute. Over here, you can see that I've got DCAD here and UNDF, although I have no values in there. I could start punching some values in there. I'm going to go ahead and maximize milk production, and then I'm going to minimize ration cost. If I'm going to feed for amino acids, I would use this. This used to be stuck under here, and the Rumen group moved it out here, so it's actually the third objective I can use. I'm going to keep the quick search mode on, and I'm going to show my best 5 solutions. So this is how I'm going to set it up right now. Minimize total ration cost, maximize milk production. I'll close that. And then over here, you could see my parameters. If I had a parameter of, this had to be 29, you can see that I'm already erring in here. So this would give you a warning of where you are. You can see down here in the nonlinear area, I'm having the system is telling me I can't have the ME and the MP supply that I wanted for the increased level of milk that I had. I don't have single source amino acids in here for our simple demonstration, so I'm just going to unclick these so it will not be used in there. So I feel pretty comfortable with the way it's set up. I'm going to go ahead and come back to the optimizer, and I'm going to just click the optimizer and watch it run. I didn't ask it to do a lot of hard work, but I just said, can you make more milk? And so at 99.5 and 99.5, it said it can make a small amount of milk, but I asked for 97 or 98. But this diet is optimal in the fact that it came up with the optimal area here with no gray bars here to tell me. So I had 57.8 on intake, and I'm at 57.9. Cost me $7.72. This is a few pennies more, but I'm making basically, a pound more milk. Let's take it. Let's accept this as my solution because I did a simple optimization for minimizing total cost and maximizing milk production. So if I highlight this, and then I can go to solutions, then this will become my recipe page. So what's important is my old saved diet is saved back there, but this is the new optimized diet that I brought back into the recipe page. We can go down through and look at it and evaluate everything, but I want to compare it to the other diet. So what I can do is I can hit the comparison tab here, and it will take me to the 2 comparisons, and I'll do that first. So number 1, or my saved, is that saved diet that I started with. You can see version 2 is that optimized version. You can see any changes here on differences. So again, it took less haylage, took more corn silage. I'm actually asking it to highlight the deviations of there's a small button here. I'm going to do on expected production. So what I could do is I could use the fixed targeted milk as a comparison, or I can do the expected production. But using the optimizer in this function, I'll use expected. So now it's saying if I look down through here on my nutrient level, my crude protein, you can see it went up a tad bit. The forage, same. Sugar went up a tad bit. Starch stayed the same, went down just a tad bit. I can actually go to the CNCPS here and go to allowable milk and look at this allowable milk. So here it's showing me I went up by, 0.83, 1.86%. So here's my pound of milk, or 0.8 on milk for the ME. Come over here and look and say, okay, my total cost per head is right here, and you can see, okay, that's purchase cost, total cost per head, right up here. So you can see I added 3 cents a day to my cost. Now my income over feed cost after the feed cost is going up 8 cents. So maybe something to look at. I'm not satisfied with this yet. So let's go back to the recipe and take a peek at it and say, let's try to feed as much corn silage and take that haylage back some more. So I can go back to the optimizer, and now I can say, hey, let's try to limit the haylage down to, let's put a 0 out the minimum, and just for the example, say 9 pounds dry matter on that, and maybe go up to, we're probably pretty close to our max here on corn silage, but let's just run it again now and see if it can bring in another diet where we've limited some haylage. Okay, no optimal solutions, and it's saying that my RDP is low down here. So just for this example, I might say, hey, I would take a 9.5 in the RDP area. I do have crude protein like Hermana was showing, but I have no values on there, so it's open to choose whatever it wants. I'm at 99.5 of the MP supply, so that's what we're really running on here. Let me just optimize that thing again. I'd love to see, yeah, I'm coming up with 10 optimal solutions. And it said I can do 9.57, 9.58 down here. So it gives me some more tools to run and play with. I noticed it snuck up to 58 again on my optimal diets. Now this is total cost, maximize milk production, but we tried to take the haylage back, and it said it can do it. It also, in every scenario, when I'm looking at this, it said on every scenario, it wanted less high moisture corn. It didn't like so much of this cottonseed either. It seemed like it would take less of it every time, although sometimes it was marginally down there. So what we could even do is say, let's let the optimizer run a tad bit, and let's let it run a couple more scenarios. So now I can see that it's taken more corn silage than we started with. This is the current diet that we started with at the beginning of the exercise. We're at 97 and 97 in here. So what we may want to do is let's take this one to the recipe screen also. Now we take it to solution. It's asking me, do you want to take it to solution? Yeah, sure. Now here it is in my page, and I can look up and down through it. And we would be spending a lot more time doing the nutrition aspect of this, but we're just kind of playing with some keystrokes here right now. But if I'm happy with this, I again can hit comparison tab here. And I'll do that. So now when I look at the comparison tab, I'm comparing version 2 and version 3. But what I can do is I can choose which versions I want to look at by either clicking these two and then compare selected, or just doing save versus last, which is really a quick little keystroke. So now I can always compare my first diet with my most current one, come down to allowable milk and look at this and say, okay, now I'm 1.5 pounds and 2 pounds. My dry matter went from 57.8 to 58. And then I can scroll down through here and look at where I am on cost, income over feed cost per head. I can actually go back to the recipe screen and say, you know, can I lower crude protein just a tad bit? And so I can actually start in here and just hunt and peck. So for this scenario, what I might do is say, what happens if I highlight here and I hit the minus sign on my keyboard, and I'm just going to take a 1/4 pound less of this. It will do the math for me already. My producer has an excess of corn silage, so I go up there, highlight the dry matter pounds, hit the plus box, and put that 1/4 pound of stuff in there. And what I can do, instead of going to this comparison screen again, if I'm doing things quickly, I'd love to see what that is, but I still want to make some changes. I can go in here and say catch a version, and I can keep working on my scenarios here. I have whole roasted bean on farm. I have bean meal I'm purchasing. So let's go back and say minus 0.5. And then let's put in this other plus 0.5. A lot of keystrokes we're using here and everything, but we'll put the video out so you can stop and start it. But I just had an idea. What about feeding my own roasted instead of buying soybean meal? I can actually classify those as purchase feeds and home feeds, and then optimize on income over purchase feed cost if I'd like to. But what I really want to do is catch that version and then look at all those comparisons. So let's go to the comparison screen. I'm showing the saved versus the last version because I asked for that. So there's another little feature. I can go back to versions, and I can say the first one just by highlighting the first one and typing in present diet. And then this one was optimized. Oops. You can just optimize one. Kurt and I are working on these too. He liked this version, so this is Kurt's version. Sorry, I'm supposed to spell correctly. This one was Emiliano's. He liked that. And, you know, then this is the proposed. And then if I put these in here and close this, I can go to the show all feature up here. So again, I'm comparing, I've decided to choose the first saved one versus version 5, but in the show all feature, it actually lays all these versions out for you. And this is such a cool function. Looking at this, it was so fun to put in a present diet of a farm and then your next decision, or, you know, 2 forage changes and an idea of what was going on at the dairy. But now we have all of those proposed feeds or rations. I didn't like Emiliano's, so I am highlighting it, and then I'm going to hide selected versions. And so this is just such a powerful little sheet in the fact that I can go back down here to allowable milk. I can go through in my allowable milks. What would happen if we were playing with amino acids in here? We can actually go into the amino acid area, click here. You can see every iteration of amino acid you ever wanted to see. But again, we'd be down here looking at, methionine on energy. What do we do? If you made some other iteration, you can just look through the CNCPS outputs here. Milk composition. Did we change the output of the predicted fat yield? Did we make a change? And we did here. But again, that's just looking at some of those features. Down here are some of the big heavyweights. Total cost per head per day, 772, 776, 7, and we go down here to our winner at $7.67. So again, real cool feature. We used to have to take and stick this over into Excel and save it, and then talk to Hermano and said, how could we do this better? Created this whole area right here called this user report. So what we're going to do is go through a real quick one, and there's a tutorial on this. So you would create a new report, and you would call it day 4 endurance test. Oops. And then I'd probably put a date behind it. Okay, so I can make this report, and I can save that report. Now, what it asks me to do is to include what I want in that report. So, little detail here, but clear over here on the far left is the buttons you want to hit. So I want to show crude protein, NDS, forage percent, starch, ether extract, and maybe then when I come down here, I want to explode allowable milk. Then I want to show ME and MP milk. Okay. Keep scrolling down. You can blow up any of these ones you want here and put anything on the outer bar is the report area. Okay, as we go down here, what I'm going to do is do cost per head, and then I'm going to do income over feed cost per head. All right. So now I go back up here and I save this report because I created this report. And now I'm going to save this report. And it's saved. Now I can show report. What a neat feature. I mean, this just saves a ton of work. So, I can show that the proposed report or the proposed ration, whichever changes, are much better for income over feed costs. Oops, I lost money. Kurt won. So, the idea is you can see here where your rations are. You can choose what you want to see, what you want to show on the CNCPS, and then the efficiency. These reports, you can make a ton of them. Again, here's a whole bunch of them. I did, a lactation report around fat, a base report, some lactation amino acid reports. So you can bring these in, pull them up, show the report. Simple. Once you create them, they're there. Save this to a PDF, get your marker out, change it, put your yellow lines and everything on there. A super easy report to show and to do. And that is done through this area right in here. Now, the idea is nothing is saved except my saved or my present. It didn't change that name. I go back and check on that, but nothing has been saved in here. And if you wanted to, you can click this multiple savings tab and it will save every one of those whatever this diet is called, it will save option 1, 2, and 3 with version 1, version 2, version 3 with the date behind it. So just a ton of things you can do within here, looking at this report section. Just a phenomenal little thing that's done here. I think you can actually export these and some other user can import them. So if you see one somebody else has made, maybe you can buy them an adult beverage and they'll share that with you. We're going to go over these inside boxes later, and that's all over here. But for this section, this user report in the comparisons has to do with these outside boxes. You create the name, you save it, and then you choose everything you want, and then save it, and then it's in your list. So you have basically anything you want, and all you got to do is show that report. And then the cool thing too is I can go to utilities, create the file, create the PDF, and this is saved in my external files back under that dairy. I'd put it under this dairy right in here, and I'd name it comparison report, blah, blah, blah. But simple way to get around and use this thing. Again, that just for the system, looking at what we're doing, how we're doing it here. So with that fast roll through it, we're about at our time limit. Emiliano, Kurt, are there any questions?
There are a lot of
I think yeah, go ahead, Kurt.
I was just going to say there's a lot of requests to do some specific optimizing for milk components and such, but I think people realize that this is such a powerful tool. Getting to that level of detail is going to take a lot more time than what we have today.
So yeah, that was interesting because as we started playing around with this idea, now you're starting to look at not the current fat or the current milk yield, but the predicted milk yield and the predicted fat content. So, this is another way to use the optimizer. The whole idea is when we get to the optimizer, what's been really fun for the last 10 or 11 years, I don't know how long it's been, but seeing how people use this differently. It really should be income over feed cost without anything else, right? In hard economic times, you'll be doing that. Looking at the way Mike is doing a lot of this stuff, it's all on maximizing productive nitrogen, So that's the second objective, up in your area, Kurt, maximizing forage content, those on-farm feeds that you already paid for, that's huge. A couple other features that you really need to be aware of in that when I go back to my diet and I look down at my milk price, this seems to work the best if you have the component milk pricing in. So this brings in the component pricing. Nobody really knows what the PPD is, but I actually went to farm structure, and the dairyman Monday when I was at a dairy, he told me he was getting $14.60. So I matched that up pretty close right down here with on what I thought the PPD might be. There is a video tutorial on economics, but we're not going to touch on that today. Go to the YouTube channel and look at some of that on economics. We could go into the optimizer and settings and even go to these two options. And that's something that they're in progress working on. Romano, do you want to comment on that, or?
Only one considerations. When we want to maximize milk protein yield, given that the prediction is only based on CNCPS, we may need to focus on amino acids formulation, because only increasing methionine and lysine absorbed, we can get an increase of metabolizer of an increase of milk protein. The system is not able to give us a good prediction at, without the inclusion of rumen protected amino acid. We are trying to work in different ways in order to have different prediction, but it is not so easy.
So if I brought in two products that were methionine and lysine, and watch these levels, and was trying to increase this one way to do this would be to now to run a comparison again from this diet, but now, if I've increased my methionine and lysine and I'm comfortable with these levels, let me pop them up just a little bit more. Then what I can do is I can say, now I know that my methionine and lysine are close to the specs. Will I get a 0.15 increase? And let's say I go from 3.15 to 3.25. Now when I do my comparisons and I want to show, oh, that's fine. Now when I show the last, I would have to go through and make sure my milk protein is switched on current production. Then it shows my income over feed cost, has, of course, I probably didn't charge anything for those amino acids, but this income over feed cost, this is a reflection not of increased milk, but increased milk protein. Basing it on current production is what happens when you put it up here. So the last two scenarios, I wanted the same milk, but I wanted more milk protein. And so
another issue we have in this regard is that we do not link the potential increase in fat and protein yield. We cannot link with a potential new milk price. In other words, the milk price is only calculated based on the current components and not based on the predicted components. So we cannot have an advantage based on a possible increase in the income over feed cost due to a potential highest price. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and so the idea then is to try and figure out, so like when I change this up here, so my milk price now is $14 per 100. So if I make my milk 3.22, my price per 100 is increased, and the gross income for that animal is now higher. And that is why using that comparison function with the current production does kind of let me take into account there. But that is tricking the system ahead of what it's supposed to do. Again, you know, what we wanted to do was just give you a general overview of what we think is an underutilized tool. And I think if you spend some time in the optimizer understanding these settings, and then, you know, the idea is to remove some constraints, and then as you get to these optimal diets or suboptimal that look acceptable to you, you can increase your constraints. But the idea is to start wide and shrink in. And even with your feeds, you usually start with what you have with a percentage of each side, and then you can start manipulating those as you want.